This boy can grow up to be a singer because he lives in a community that supports his needs. He's part of a project combining microlending, healthcare, and education to help people bring themselves out of poverty. See how small loans are making a big difference on big questions. I'm Kim Clark.
And I'm Pat Werheim.
We go out into the world to look at everything.
Topics such as food deserts, wage theft, and recidivism in jails.
Access to healthcare, education, welfare, major issues we face at home and around the world today.
Come search with us for answers to these issues and more
as we discovered new answers to today's big questions.
Microlending is part of a larger international project to alleviate poverty globally. For those of you who don't know, microlending involves lending very small amounts of money, usually to women, so that they could be employed in some very small bit of business.
One way of empowering the poor is through microlending programs. Microlending grants the poor access to very small loans, which can mean the difference between owning a business and surviving on one meal a day. Loans usually range between $3 and $150. In this rural community, women form groups that work with a social worker to learn about money management, assets, and the importance of savings. The group creates its own bank that votes on loan distribution, insures the loans, and requires weekly payments and savings. Each woman has a passbook in which all of her payments and deposits are recorded every week. Initial loans are very small, and once they are repaid, the woman can apply again for a larger loan. As she's building credit, she's also learning about how she can increase her income. Rarely is a loan in default.
Microlending, by and large, is lends to women for the very simple reason that women are much more likely to pay back than men. Sorry, guys. And usually microlending involves lending to a group of women so they can each give each other a hard time if they don't pay back, and they usually do. The payback rate for these women is about 98%, and that's globally, not just in Bangladesh.
Women enrolled in the Village Savings Program meet in groups of about 15 to 30 people and elect officers. They convene weekly to discuss their problems and suggest solutions. Each woman commits to saving about 5 taka, which is about 3 cents every week, in a bank account secured by the organization. Their funds build securely, with interest in their savings, a rare privilege in this rural area. With this financial responsibility, women can become more involved in the family's future.
An important part of microlending as well is micromanaging the loans. So in a good microlending project, a manager will go in every 2 weeks, and not just to collect interest on the loans, but to make sure that my sewing machine is going, my goat is being milked, my farm is working well, my loom is working well, to make sure that I'm actually making money, which is the whole purpose of this project.
The loans are funded initially by Partners in Sustainable Development International, and eventually by the Village Savings Program. Individuals can secure loans of up to $125 for purchase of goats, land, housing improvements, and small business initiatives. The loans are repaid over the course of a year, often with profits by the entrepreneurial ventures that would have otherwise not existed. With careful vetting and a robust savings program, over 32,000 microloans have been issued by PSDI to date, with a repayment rate of 98%.
We were invited to Bangladesh by the Partners for Sustainable Development International. It's a very small NGO that works not just on microlending, but on taking whole families out of poverty.
One group of women acquired a loan to purchase a traditional loom, dating back hundreds if not thousands of years, and the machinery and supplies to make traditional grass-woven mats. They were given this loan because they had an ancestral knowledge of this process. As the business grows over the upcoming years, they will be able to take out another loan and purchase additional equipment and expand. This is more than a business. It's also a proud family tradition, continuing to be passed on to the next generation, and the next generation.
We had a child, a grandmother, and a mother all working in the same industry for making these mats.
And it was astonishing. They were all sort of sitting on their haunches for all day, which I got pain thinking about it. But they were amazing, doing this weaving back and forth, making these beautiful mats, which then they'll sell in the village and in other villages. It was a great project.
And the watchword for all of it is diligence, because everyone seems so connected.
Yes, because they're doing what they really know how to do and getting a little funding to help them do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Microloans are often taken for the creation of small businesses and for making improvements or expansions on existing businesses. With a few US dollars, the borrowed sum can be leveraged for a great deal of uses. In response to Bangladesh's shrinking forest, many women raised trees on road sign plantations. The country's forested area had fallen from almost 18% to under 7%, causing soil erosion and changes in underground water levels. With women tending to almost 800 kilometers of planted saplings, the trees stand at a creative intersection between economic and environmental needs. These highly skilled women produce a variety of products, from equipment containers to irrigation pumps, that are sold in a variety of different markets. The foot-powered water pumps these women produce are sold for many different purposes, including irrigating crops and accessing fresh drinking water. Another profitable startup is the purchase and raising of chicks. With a small initial down payment made with a microloan, it pays substantial dividends once the chicks mature. For the person taking the microloan, this business is easy to learn, with a quick turnaround of profit. Social workers from the parent organization regularly check up on these startups, giving guidance to those who have not yet had previous business opportunities.
These are examples of microlending, but of course the father of microlending is Muhammad Yunus. I think, if I remember your story right, wasn't he up so hard up that he couldn't get a loan to start the bank that started all of this and became history?
Yes. Muhammad Yunus, by the way, is a little guy. He's shorter than I am, and he weighs about 12 pounds.
But
that doesn't stop him. He was a professor of economics and finance, and he went out and wondered why everybody was so poor. So he met this woman who was making beautiful bamboo chairs. And he said, how much are you selling your chairs for? She said, I'm selling them for $5, but I only make 2 cents a chair. And he said, that's not right. Well, she said, now this woman was illiterate. She said, I have to borrow money. And she said, and I'm paying 200% interest. Well, he said, what if I lent you money at 12% interest? Ha, she said, that sounds pretty good. How much will it cost? He said, to lend you. Oh, she said, $28. So he lent her the $28, and this began his idea of lending to people without capital. And of course, she paid it back. And then he started the Grameen Bank. But trying to start it, he asked the Bank of Bangladesh to initiate these loans. And they said, oh, no, we'd never lend to people who don't have any collateral. We didn't learn that in school. We would never do that. So finally they allowed him to start his own bank, and that's when he mortgaged his house because, of course, he didn't have any capital.
And I think when you and I were talking to Muhammad Yunus, he said he took the $28 for that initial loan out of his own pocket.
Oh, yes.
And handed it to her on the spot.
He started off with his own money. It's now an almost $1 billion and it is, as he says, this is a for-profit bank.
Yes.
This is capitalism. This bank makes money. But he says he calls it a development bank or a social business because their goal is to bring people out of poverty.
We took part in a roundtable discussion with Professor Muhammad Yunus at DePaul University's Lincoln Park campus.
It's good to be back in Chicago.
The discussion centers around Professor Yunus's models for microlending and his approach to social business. We talked also about the Grameen Bank, with which he won the Nobel Peace Prize.
The bank lends out over $1.5 billion a year. We have something like 8.3 million borrowers, 2,600 branches. 97% of the shares of the bank are owned by the borrowers. They decide the policy of the bank. All this money comes from its own system, so it doesn't take money from outside. Each branch is supposed to become self-reliant in terms of funds. Right from the beginning, they have to use their own money to lend money to the poor people.
And Muhammad Yunus is so convinced of his model that he has argued that if everyone would adopt this model of microlending, we could reduce, if not eliminate, poverty globally by 2020. Now, we probably aren't going to achieve that, but what has happened is he has set up a model that's been adopted in all parts of Asia, South America, Africa, and even in the United States, in New York City, and believe it or not, Omaha, Nebraska.
Almost every country in the world now have microcredit program. Some of the programs didn't work. There was a big controversy. It won't work in the United States. People are different. And I always said that, look, people are same anywhere in the world. These days, people are people. They react the same way, same opportunity they get excited about. It's a question of how you do it. So it's not the fault of the people, it's the fault of the people who are doing it. If something doesn't go right, don't blame the people, blame yourself. You didn't know how to do it.
Well, when we were in Haiti, we met a baker who is using the same model. And she's gone from a very tiny operation to quite a successful bakery. Take a look.
My name is Muriel Francois. When I received the money, I invested in 2 convection ovens. 1 year from now, my goal is to sleep more than 3 hours a night. I'd like to hire more people and train them. I'd like to hire more people and act in a managerial role. My dream is to one day create a franchise. If you have the desire to work, the poverty may be close by, but your soul will be intact.
In Haiti, the largest microlending organization is Foncose, which was founded in 1994 by a priest, Haitian priest, Father Joseph.
I've done a series of microloans to Foncose, and about every 6 months it's been paid back, and then I asked if I want to roll it over to another, and I do. So it's really interesting.
How long, can I ask, how long have you been doing that?
For 3 years.
Really?
Yeah. The amazing part about Foncose is they, again, lend to rural people. They do lend to men as well as women. They have about a 95 to 98% return rate, so they don't have many loan losses.
Just like anybody, they don't want a lot of debt. They live with a lot of stress, a lot of risk in their lives. They're very, very vulnerable. And many of them are afraid that if they enter into a loan arrangement with you, that because your life is at risk if you borrow from a money lender and then you can't pay back. So they get nervous about whether we're going to hurt them, whether we're going to take their house away from them, even though we don't ever even require that kind of a guarantee or anything. But the other thing I want to stress is that it's not all about loans. First of all, we've learned a lot from Brack and Grameen, but what is unique is that it didn't start as a microcredit program. Neither Father Joseph nor I, when I came to start directing it, had ever heard of microcredit. He wanted a bank the poor could call their own. At that time in microcredit, it was microcredit, that's all it was. From day one, he said we need to have savings, we need to have loans, we need to have education, all of that has to come together in this. It wasn't until several years later that the microfinance world started talking about credit plus. That meant credit with education or something. We were already doing that.
One of the things that Foncose does do, which is interesting, when you come in for a loan, you also have to have a medical checkup. They want to be sure you're pretty healthy. And this is incredible. This is very, very important.
Sometimes the first time they've ever had a physical checkup in their lives.
Yeah. And it reminds us back to PSDI in Bangladesh of thinking about these projects, poverty as a system, and trying to get people to escape from the system, which includes health and education as well as money. And this takes us back to Bangladesh and PSDI again. Like Foncose, PSDI in Bangladesh is interested in the health and education of all its families. The health is really an issue because they're in very remote villages. There's almost no health care provided by the government. So they're working slowly to increase clinics in these rural areas.
When poor people in Bangladesh get sick, it means no more income from their factory job or farm. Government hospitals are too far for most rural families to reach, and often poor families are denied access to care due to bureaucratic problems. When the breadwinner of a family becomes ill or contracts a disease, the family's income is reduced or frozen. The whole family may suffer without food, clean water, or housing as they go into even more crippling debt. This happens all the time with easily treatable diseases. But the breadwinner's illness is not the only critical problem poor families have. Often, a large amount of money is required to treat children, pregnant women, relatives, and others, which prevents families from overcoming their poverty. Doctors, paramedics, and healthcare workers rotate facilities to cover large areas. Poor families pay for services by registering for a sliding scale insurance program based on their poverty level. It costs about 50 taka, or 30 cents, per family per year, and families are covered for up to 70% of all their medical costs. Many of these fees are waived entirely.
The second piece, which is really interesting, is education. Many of their families are so poor they can't imagine sending their children to the free government school, which may be 2 or 3 kilometers away. And so what they do in these villages is have the villagers build a small school which covers grades 1 to 3, and they hire a local village person, usually a young woman who's been through 8th grade, and she educates these children through 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. We were able to see this, and it's very touching to watch.
My name is Poppy. As a child, I did well in school until 5th grade. Most people go for 9 or 10 years. But because I am a girl, there was no money for me to continue. I was 13 when my education ended, and my father arranged for me to marry a man from another village. I was born and raised in Nojipur, but had to move here to be near my husband's family. We live across the field from the development group, and I am grateful for their facilities. Because we found this place, my children can go to school. If my daughter can go to school for 9 years, then I think my life will be complete.
Arif is a boy who attends a PSDI school. Arif can go to school and practice his singing. He's the best singer in his class. One of the criticisms of microlending is that although it helps people escape poverty, it does not offer them the resources to maintain independent economic stability. While education doesn't solve the problem entirely, it gives future generations a better chance to continue their parents' progress. Children enroll in the centers to complete a 2-year course that covers preschool and grades 1 and 2. To date, over 52,000 children have graduated from these centers and transferred on to government schools.
তোমাকে ভালোবাসি আমি কিছুতেই ভুলতে পারি না।
Arif hopes to become a professional singer one day. With the skills he's learned at school, he can pursue a career and create a successful, stable life. Arif and his classmates are now part of a system that was once solely reserved for families with money. PSDI's Child Development Centers aim to help these children form the foundation for Bangladesh's future economic growth. When we visited Bangladesh, we found almost half the population of the United States placed into something about the size of Iowa. In rural areas we visited, poverty was not something they saw on a daily basis. If, for instance, they woke up and had access to drinking water, some food, and were not desperately sick, they were what they called good. To them, poverty was seen as a lack of work or a lack of dignity. Poverty to many people was seen as not being useful to the other members of the village community. Poverty was often used as a synonym for shame.
You know, it brings up the question, is microlending the answer to this country or really any country?
And I think the short answer is yes and no. Microlending, when it's done systemically, like PSDI and Foncosé do it, takes a number of people out of abject poverty to have food and shelter and minimum education. Is it the answer to providing economic stability for a whole country? Probably not. You need to move from microlending into cottage industries, and then eventually you'll move into industrialization. But you need to begin somewhere, and this is the right place to begin.